I thank the witness for your testimony. The chair will now recognize members for 5 minutes for questions. And I will be going first, and I'm going to direct my first question to Mr. Dustin Klatush. You mentioned in your statement that your tribe felt fortunate to have been able to secure enactment of a bill in the 117th Congress to allow the tribe to enter into leases up to 99 years. Was time of the essence in getting that bill passed, and why did the tribe need to get it done during the last Congress?
First and foremost, we wanted to keep the interests of the two outside entities that had approached us about warehouse projects. The more time that passed, the more likely that outside businesses will lose interest or look elsewhere. Also, we wanted to keep the option open to begin construction during the construction season in our area, which is April to October.
Wonderful, thank you for that. I'd like to also question Mr. Rupnick. You testified in favor of establishing a new process for acquiring lands under tribal jurisdiction in restricted fee status. Do you believe that restricted fee land status would be more efficient for the federal government as well as for the tribal governments?
Yes, I do. And part of that is that tribes can assume jurisdiction over those lands immediately, and thereby reducing resources needed from the federal government to manage and apply those lands there. Right now, as I stated in my testimony, we had fee status, application for a trust status that took over 14 years to be able to get that done for us to try and enhance our operation, our Class 3 gaming operation. With the federal government, BIA, Department of Interior, going through all the different assessments and everything else and just essentially stonewalling a lot of this stuff, that's what really hinders tribes when they're trying to build economic development within the reservation. So being able to reduce a lot of that paperwork, being able to reduce those areas that are required by oversight from regulations or unneeded regulations would definitely benefit the tribe and help reduce those costs. Thank you.
Well, that makes sense, and I'm surprised at the amount of time that you've referenced in your testimony as to what it took to be able to develop and move forward with those projects. Mr. Robinson, in 2016, Congress enacted the Indian Trust Asset Reform Act, which you referred to, and among several things, it authorized a demonstration project in which Indian tribes may be authorized to negotiate to assume management and control of its non-mineral trust assets under a plan approved by the Secretary of Interior. And under the ITERA demonstration project, your tribe took over some forest management activities, I understand. Can you tell the committee specifically what activities this includes and how ITERA works?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the forest management activities that the tribe assumed are those same forest management activities that are listed under the National Indian Forest Resource Management Act. So these include things like timber sales, timber permits, prescribed burn plans, forestry enterprise agreements, and other authorities that would generally be approved under the BIA through the National Indian Forest Resource Management Act. And the way that ITARA works is that as tribes assume responsibility under the demonstration project, they're able to take on those authorities that the Bureau of Indian Affairs had been performing on behalf of the tribe. And so now those decisions are being made by the tribal government under tribal rules and regulation as opposed to federal rules and regulations.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And finally, Ms. Wavalene, you commented and testified about the need for infrastructure and the impact that a lack of roads has for the rural community that you represent, the rural tribes. Is the federal government involved in all of the decisions related to road building on your reservation?
Yes, on behalf of the Tohono Nation, the roads program is a BIA roads program. And so not only the state, but the federal roads that consist on the Tohono Nation, so the bureaucracy that does create for getting approvals and partnerships. I know that the nation has stepped up to try to remedy some of the impacts on the roads, but because of liability issues, we are prohibited from pursuing any of those endeavors in addressing the potholes, the cracks in the road, and our bridges and whatnot. And so it becomes a liability issue if the nation is to continue to address those needs. And so it's the BIA at the federal level that is technically responsible for the roads on the Tohono Nation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you all for your testimony and responding. The chair now recognizes the ranking minority member for her questioning.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hagerman, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony. Vice Chairwoman Saunders, thank you very much for your testimony that laid out the multiple obstacles that tribes face, especially in rural areas. Can you talk a little bit more about financing and access to capital and workforce development? What do you think are the biggest financing obstacles for tribal small businesses on rural reservations?
So for businesses on the Tohono Nation, for whether it be tribal members or anyone wanting to partner in providing services to the Tohono Nation, we're about a good hour, maybe 50-mile drive from the nearest city. And so having to travel the roads and looking at the investment in regards to their products of services has been a challenge because of the technical availability of services and education, and for them to invest in our community based on the distance between the nearest city. And so the challenges that not only our members face for products that are readily available, but for those individuals and businesses that do have these products, and investing in traveling to our community and what it all entails, and more so today with the economy and the prices of all the products, it hits us on our reservation because of the delivery of services and the fees and how expensive it is. So it's really important to invest in small businesses at the community level, but also for those business off the nation to really look at their investments and not push it off onto our tribal members. So more funding availability to all businesses at all level what benefit. It's a win-win situation.
Thank you. And Chairman Rupnick, in the discussions about the a restricted fee status, I want to just clarify. The intent is to ensure that the land remains subject to tribal jurisdiction, not to state jurisdiction, no state taxation. So what you're trying to do, is it correct, is to make a process that is more streamlined for it to come into a restricted status, but that you retain full jurisdiction over the land. Is that correct?
That is correct. When you go through the trust application process, and some of the experience that we have had or realized over the last few years kind of depends on the local jurisdiction and who's elected into there. So when we apply for land into trust, that goes through the state, then the county, and all those different agencies can offer up objections to that, whether that land goes into trust. One of the biggest reasons why is because they realize that land comes off of their tax rolls. So they do everything that they can to make sure that those lands that are held in fee status are still taxable for the longest amount of period of time. That causes a lot of delay because then you're fighting with county, state governments to be able to move that process forward. Then you've got all of the other regulations that are coming down from Department of Interior, environmental assessments, so on and so forth, that really limits the tribe's ability to do anything on that land. Where if a streamlined process where 90 days that land is purchased and moved into a restricted fee status, then the tribes could immediately start developing lands or whatever businesses that they wish to pursue on that piece of property.
Thank you. And Chairman Klatush, you in your written testimony, you did mention your, because 5 minutes goes real fast, the idea of expanding the Buy Indian Act. Would you also recommend that we expand the ability of tribes to compact and contract outside of the two agencies that are limited to? I assume, does everybody have, I think everybody on this panel has either compacts or contracts, and would you all agree you'd love to have those expanded to the other agencies? Maybe we'll start with Chairman Klatush.
The Buy Indian Act, as currently drafted, only applies to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Indian Health Service. The Department of Defense is not included in the Buy Indian Act, and I believe that expanding the act to include the Defense Department would benefit all tribes.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll go straight over to Mr. Robinson. What do you think about expanding Buy Indian and compacting contracting?
So I can't speak to the Buy Indian, but I can say that anytime we have an opportunity to expand the compact authorities for tribes, it allows tribes to have a lot more opportunity for self-governance and streamlining of process and procedures. We agree
So
with that.
thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Lamalfa from California.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations on your role here. Looking forward to it, so thank you. Appreciate the panel from your time and travel to be here and be part of this here today and express your firsthand concerns with the processes here we have with, I share your frustration as well on getting permitting done to do some of the other things we need to do in my rural Northern California district, such as timber harvest, salvage after fire, water storage, many, many years involved. So we're all right in the same boat on that. And we're looking to find relief for you all and other tribes around the country on being able to do basic things, economic things that are good for your membership and such. So let me, and it was expressed a couple times too, the amount of time it takes, and also the effort. Now, we're here to legislate, so it's our job, so we have nothing to complain about, but when an individual tribe, for example, we have cases where there's surplus lands being held by a federal entity, and a tribe nearby is interested in that, taking it off their books and put it into play. We've had those. We have more prospects up in my district, too, for tribes interested in that. But it requires an entire piece of legislation to move at whatever pace it moves through, hopefully within a 2-year cycle in Congress, and that's got to be frustrating because it's year after year after year, or recognition for tribes here that have had their recognition taken away in the past. So I get how frustrating that is, and there needs to be a lot more streamlining to get where you need to go. So, Vice Chairwoman Saunders, you were talking about your lands there in Arizona a little bit, and you have in your purview 734 miles of roads that are under BIA jurisdiction to keep spiffed up, and obviously from your testimony, they're not spiffy. So what kind of progress they make year in, year out, and is there an entity within the tribe, for example? Does the tribe have its own construction company that it could be doing that on its own with the right kind of funding?
Thank you for the question. On behalf of the Tohono Nation, we have a BIA roads program. We have a Department of Planning and Economic Development that works hand in hand with the BIA roads program. And so looking to address that, the bureaucracy that it does create for the funding, channeling the funding through the BIA and getting the approvals, the time that in itself takes, but definitely our planning program has really improved in regards to addressing all of the grants that are available, all of the funding cycles that come through year in, year out, the time that it takes to actually get that funding and a contract in place to address the roads on our nation is years behind. And so I know that
How many miles of road have been done, let's say, in the last 3 years, do you think? Just a rough guess.
less than 100 miles,
Less than 100?
yes.
Is that upgrading from perhaps dirt roads and gravel?
Maintenance and upgrades, and it's also in collaboration with some funding that came through CPP, because we do have Border Patrol that utilizes our roads as well, and so partnering with them to address and seek funding, but also having to still go through the whole BIA process.
Quickly, on your water situation, are you on well water, or Do you draw, I'm not quite sure where you are in proximity. Do you use Colorado River water for any purpose? Are y'all well water, or what's your source?
We are part of the Colorado River, but we do have well source on the Tohono Nation that delivers water to all of majority of our communities.
Okay, thank you. Let me shift to Mr. Robison from Cow Creek here. What are, we talked about the three different styles of how land can be in fee or trust or a restricted fee. What do you find is going to be the most workable for you long-term? You're just up the road from me a little bit, and in the various things that you're trying to accomplish economically, what's going to be the best tool for you?
Great, thank you for that question. Really, I think having a variety of options on the table for the tribe to select from is important. And so I think, as I said in my testimony today, having restricted fee available for us as an option, which we don't currently have as an option, is something we're very interested in. And one of the challenges is obviously the taxation with the state, but also having additional authorities for us to manage those fee lands and provide potential business opportunities. That's extremely important. Trust lands, as we continue to work through the things like the Indian Trust Asset Reform Act, the Hearth Act, we're able to bring on more regulations and things within the tribal government, which makes things more streamlined, but trust lands continue to be a challenge for us as well, especially getting through the fee to trust process.
It's so hard. It's so hard. Yeah. For other three panelists, real fast, yes or no, are all three options really important to you for the other three here? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, there's not more time. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Ms. Gonzalez Colon from Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations on chairing this committee. Happy to be here. And thank you all the witnesses for being here today. I was reading all the information regarding this hearing, and I was very surprised at the multiple levels of restrictions. You got to use your own land. And in that sense, even if it's a trust land, fee land, or restricted fee land, at the end, I believe that land is the most important resource you have for economic development, for social, cultural issues. And when you got all those restrictions, there's no way you can succeed. So I'm happy this committee is doing this hearing to see how we can expedite and allow all the tribes to use their land. And we're talking about American Indians and, of course, Alaskan Natives as well. So one of the questions will be, in 2000, when I was reading the testimonies, Chairman Klatush, you said that your tribe led efforts to repeal the prohibition on alcohol manufacturing on Indian lands. Coming from Puerto Rico, we produce a lot of alcohol and rum, so I know how important that is. So in your testimony, you mentioned that the tribe opened its Talking Cedar Brewery and Distillery in 2020 and during the pandemic. And my question will be how you're dealing with that at this time, and is there something regarding the Buy Indian Act that you're interested in selling products from this distillery to the nearby military base?
Yes. So the distillery and the restaurant have been doing pretty good since we've opened them. During the pandemic, the restaurant was one of the few restaurants open in the area, and we received a significant amount. But yes, we joint base Lewis McCord, yes.
And you're working to that end with the military base to sell your products using the Buy Indian Act to get all those products coming from the distillery to that place, right?
Yes.
Okay. What other challenges you have to create economic development in your lands?
For Chehalis, one of the biggest issues is staffing at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Before, during, and especially after the pandemic, there just aren't enough people in the Northwest regional office to process routine approvals and tasks. Most of the staff continues to telework, which for a long period of time, the Northwest Regional Office did not have a contracting officer. So we cannot get our 638 contracts approved. The same goes for approval of business leases, right-of-ways, and other routine matters.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, in your written testimony, you call on this committee to pursue opportunities to expand the use of restricted fee lands across the Indian country, including creating administrative process for this land designation. What should be the proposal, and how expanding the use of those restricted fee lands could help spur economic activity in your areas? What specific things we can do here to allow that growth from happening?
Great, I appreciate that question. So I think one of the things that we need to look at is how do we give access to this restricted fee classification to all tribes as a tool in their toolbox to manage fee lands subject to, or limited, without having the tax burden and without alienation, right? And so I think the restricted fee status, what that provides for Cow Creek is another option for us to look at those fee lands, hold that title for the tribe, and use additional regulations and opportunities through tribal laws and regulations, working with Congress to provide more efficient opportunities for economic development. It's an option we don't have in our toolbox right now, and I think is an option that we need to be able to look at different opportunities for economic development.
Thank you. And my last question will be to Mr. Rupnick. You say in your testimony that you've been almost 22 years since your tribe's retail shopping plaza project has been in the works and has not been completed yet. If you could look back and see on the planning stage, what other things you have changed in terms of those planning to accommodate the long time wait for that retail plaza to open, or the use of the land?
I think part of that is, just the strict interpretation on some of the regulations that are put in place that tribes are forced to work with. That would also include the Non-Intercourse Act, which I think needs to be revised as well, too, because there's a strict interpretation on that. So if tribes go out and purchase fee simple land and they can't develop it or they can't do anything with it, then you almost have to have a piece of legislation to allow tribes to be able to sell that to recoup whatever dollars they got already invested into that as well. But some of that process that we have right now is of course, it's just a huge bureaucracy when it comes to land into trust, and being able to streamline that process through the Department of Interior would help tribes tremendously when they're moving either into restricted fee or even that trust process that gives them that option of how they want to handle those lands.
Thank you, sir. My time expired. I yield back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Ms. Stansberry from New Mexico.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I also want to congratulate you on your chairmanship and welcome you to the committee, and also to the ranking member and my sister from New Mexico. And also, I want to welcome all of our tribal leaders who are here, not only on the panel, but in the audience and also tuning in today. Thank you for traveling, and thank you for being here with us today. I'm Melanie Stansbury, and I represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District, which is proudly home to a number of tribes and pueblos in New Mexico. New Mexico, of course, is home to 23 federally recognized tribes and pueblos. And the first thing that I want to just acknowledge is that while we're here to talk about economic development opportunities, our tribes and pueblos are already economic powerhouses in New Mexico and are, in fact, among some of the largest employers and generators of income in the state. In fact, amongst our tribes and pueblos, 19 of our 19 pueblos generate over $500 million in revenue alone every year in our state and employ over 11,000 people statewide. These enterprises are vital not only to our tribal communities, but also to our local and regional and state economies, and our primary sources of funding for tribal governments, as our tribal leaders know here, to fund vital services, including emergency services, roads, elder support, and so much more. I also want to just take a moment to highlight a couple of the pueblos and tribes that are in our district, in the 1st Congressional District. In particular, Sandia Pueblo, which is just north of Albuquerque, which is my hometown, employs thousands of residents living in the Albuquerque area and has quite a diversified economic portfolio. And Mescalero Apache in the southern portion of my district operates an amazing set of enterprises around the hospitality and ski businesses, as well as a number of other major enterprises in southern New Mexico. But as I was listening to the testimony this morning and also reading your testimony, I was struck by the number of barriers that still obviously are presented to so many of our tribal nations in terms of self-determination and nation building that extend far beyond even the conversation that we've had here today. And so, Madam Chairwoman, while we have made a number of huge steps forward in passing the bipartisan infrastructure law, which made massive investments, hundreds of millions of dollars of investments that have not yet hit many of our communities in terms of roads, water, broadband, and as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, which will bring a lot of money for energy infrastructure, water infrastructure. And we know that Secretary Deb Haaland and our president have made a strong commitment to tribal consultation, nation building, and economic investment. I was particularly struck by Chairwoman Saunders' testimony about the many and multivariate barriers, whether it's infrastructure, broadband, all of these things. So I want to just do a quick lightning round for all of our panelists because we do have limited time. You've presented testimony to us today, and I'm going to put you each on the spot. This is an opportunity to present to all of us and to the country. If there was one thing that you could do in Congress that you personally think would have a major impact on economic development in your communities or across our tribal nations, what would it be? And I'll start with Mr. Klatush. Yeah.
The Buy Indian Act.
Okay, and Mr. Rupnick?
There's a couple of things, one of them is dual taxation. I know that isn't a area for this committee here too, but restricted fee, allowing nations more tools in their toolbox to be able to use the land as they best see fit.
Thank you. Vice Chairwoman?
I would say the additional funding for resources for technical assistance and providing education and really looking at the different ways of the bureaucracy such as BIA and just the process in itself to try to streamline those timeframes and the processes in itself for the benefit of all.
Thank you. And Mr. Robinson?
Great, thank you for the question. I really think continuing to promote self-governance and tribal sovereignty by allowing tribes to manage their lands and resources according to tribal laws and regulations and tribal policies to meet tribal goals and objectives.
All right. Well, I'm amazed that we got through everyone. Obviously, this is just the first chapter of hopefully many conversations about hopefully bipartisan legislation we could advance to help support our tribal nations. So we appreciate you being here today, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. And I want to thank the witnesses for your incredibly valuable testimony and the members for their questions. Thank you for being here today. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the committee must submit questions to the committee clerk by 5 p.m. on Friday, March 3rd, 2023. The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for those responses. If there is no further business, without a... We've got a vote? Would you like to have a... I'd like to take one more shot, if that's okay. Which time do we have? Mr. Lamalfa from California does have a follow-up question.
Thank you. Thanks for the indulgence on that. We've got you here, so I'd like the opportunity for follow-up. Mr. Robison from Cow Creek, I wanted to touch a little more on the issues of dealing with the Endangered Species Act and timber management and such as that. So what has your tribe encountered with trying to deal with timber harvest? And I understand you had a demonstration project that you're looking at on demonstrating better forestry practices. So what has the spotted owl species, for example, brought as part of inhibiting your process there?
Thanks, the great question. Under ITARA, we have allowed, so we've taken over all the authorities from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So as far as the spotted owl, we actually do on-site monitoring and management of spotted owls under our tribal authorities. We have a tribal environmental review process that we follow now, as opposed to the National Environmental Policy Act. And for our ESA compliance, because we have assumed the federal responsibility, we no longer follow Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act. We actually fall under Section 9, the take avoidance. So we use a very comprehensive take avoidance strategy. We also have the opportunity to develop a species conservation plan working with the services on tribal lands. So really, as we look at tribal land management under ITARA for the tribe, things have actually gotten quite easier. To the question, though, on working with our adjacent federal land partners, that continues to be a challenge for us as we look at ways to reduce wildfire risk, increase forest resiliency and forest health. We have to find a way to work around the Endangered Species Act and other environmental laws that are set in place for obviously good reasons, but can be challenging and cumbersome to actually get good work done on the ground to enhance those resources.
We've had massive wildfires in Northern California and Southern Oregon. I had a 1 million acre Dixie fire, which affected my district. You had large fires in Oregon last year, 2 years ago? Doesn't matter right now, but did it come from federal land onto tribal land in your particular situation, and how many acres did it devastate?
Yeah, so we actually lost, we had a couple of fires on tribal lands immediately after the Western Oregon Tribal Fairness Act was passed, and we received 17,800 acres of BLM lands back to the tribe. We had about a 3,600 acre fire that took about 20% of that new ownership out. That actually came on from the state lands onto tribal lands and resulted in impact. But here recently, in the last few years, we've had several fires threatening tribal lands. And we've worked very diligently with the Umpqua National Forest to try to figure out how we alleviate the potential threat from those adjacent lands onto tribal lands. And so just a few years ago, we had the Smith Fire, which was a small fire, started out 10 to 12 acres. It sat unattended for about 10 days and then blew up into about a 70,000 acre fire threatening tribal fee lands and trust lands. So we have to find a way to reduce that wildfire risk.
Please submit some of your thoughts and watch what we're going to do in the Subcommittee on Forestry and in the Ag Committee, if you would, and we'll be looking at that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the indulgence. I'll yield back.
Thank you. Excellent questions, and appreciate the testimony and additional information. So again, if there is no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.